Hello, and welcome to the National D-Day Memorial's annual Memorial Day program. On behalf of the Board of Directors and staff of the National D-Day Memorial Foundation, I'm pleased that you have joined us virtually as we pause to remember the men and women who have died in battle in service of this nation. Today we will highlight the lives of some of those who made the ultimate sacrifice for freedom and the impact for those left behind. And remembering their stories, we pay tribute to the more than 1.1 million Americans who have died in service to their country since the American Revolution. Today, out of a nation of nearly 329 million people, 1.3 million Americans are in active duty military, and another 800,000 serve in the reserves, according to the Department of Defense. Today and every day, we should honor those who are willing to lay down their lives for the freedoms we enjoy. One of those individuals was Lieutenant Frances Slanger of the U.S. Army Nurses Corps. On the morning of October 21st, 1944, at the height of World War II, she mailed a letter to Stars and Stripes magazine. In it, she detailed how proud she was of the GIs. Here is a portion of what she wrote. The GIs say we rough it. We in our little tents can't see it. True, we are set up in tents, sleep on cots, and are subject to the temperament of the weather. We wade ankle deep in mud. You have to lie in it. We are restricted to our immediate area, a cow pasture or hayfield, but then who is not restricted? After taking care of some of your buddies, seeing them when they are brought in bloody, dirty, with the earth, mud, and grime, and most of them so tired, somebody's brothers, somebody's fathers, and somebody's sons, seeing them gradually brought back to life, and to see their lips separate into a grin when they first welcome you. Usually they kid, hurt as they are. It doesn't amaze us to hear one of them say, "How ya, babe," or "Holy mackerel, an American woman," or most indiscreetly, "How about a kiss?" We have learned a great deal about our American soldier and the stuff he is made of. The wounded do not cry. Their buddies come first. The patience and the determination they show, the courage and fortitude they have, is sometimes awesome to behold. It is we who are proud to be here. Rough it? No. It is a privilege to be able to receive you, and a great distinction to see you open your eyes and with that swell American grin say, "Hiya, babe." Less than 24 hours after writing this piece for Stars and Stripes, Frances Slanger was killed when a shell from a German artillery barrage hit the camp of the 45th Field Hospital in Belgium. As she was dying, she never uttered a word of complaint. She was concerned about the other nurses who were hit, and she was worried about the grief her death would bring to her mother. Frances Slanger was the first nurse to perish in the European theater after landing in Normandy. She was 31 years old. She was buried in a Belgian countryside. 6 weeks prior, the cemetery had not existed. By the end of October, more than 2,000 graves of American soldiers marked the hillside. Frances Slanger's story is just one of countless others that we could reflect on this Memorial Day. Stories of loss, of heroism, and of sacrifice. If Frances Slanger were here today, I feel certain she would not mourn her own fate, but instead remind us all that on this day and throughout the year, we need to remember those who have deliberately placed themselves in harm's way to protect our freedom and who have paid for that freedom with their lives. An aspiring writer, Frances Slanger kept a notebook full of poems, quotes, and clippings. In it was a quote from Mrs. A.J. Stanley. It read, "He has achieved success who has lived well, laughed often, and loved much, who has left the world better than he found it, whether by an improved copy, a perfect poem, or a rescued soul." On Memorial Day, and every day, we owe a debt to those Americans who, through their service and sacrifice, left the world better than they found it. Let us strive always to keep their legacy alive and to remember with reverence the freedoms they preserved.
What we call Memorial Day began as Decoration Day in the aftermath of the Civil War. After that devastating conflict cost our nation 750,000 lives, there was an understandable desire of survivors in both the North and the South to memorialize the valiant dead by placing flowers, or in the 19th century terminology, decorating their graves. When and exactly where the tradition began is disputed. Several local commemorations in 1865 or 66 are held to be the beginning of the tradition. But the main drive for a national recognition of Decoration Day began in 1868 with Union General John Logan's call for a nationwide commemoration on May 30th, a date chosen because flowers would be in bloom pretty much anywhere. At the very first official Decoration Day in 1868, Ohio Congressman and future President James A. Garfield praised the heroes buried at Arlington Cemetery. For love of country, they accepted death, and thus resolved all doubts, and made immortal their patriotism and their virtue. But with these, the conflict ended. The victory was won, when death stamped on them the great seal of heroic character, and closed a record which years can never blot. After World War I, Memorial Day's name and purpose were altered to recognize the dead of all American wars as well as losses in peacetime service, not just those of the Civil War. However, it was not until 1971 that Memorial Day became an official national holiday. At the same time, in a move that was not popular with all, Congress moved Memorial Day from May 30th to the last Monday of May. Today, it remains a day of somber reflection, and in the words of Abraham Lincoln, it is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. Our nation has been richly blessed from its beginning with men and women who recognize that the promise of America is a cause worth defending, worth risking their lives, worth paying, if necessary, the ultimate sacrifice. Whether they wore the wool of a Continental soldier, or the blue or gray of the Civil War, or the olive drab of the men of D-Day, or the desert tans of modern heroes in Iraq and Afghanistan, we honor those who have given their all to defend our freedom. We do this thinking of the challenge issued decades ago by Civil War veteran and Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. At the grave of a hero we end, not with sorrow, but with the contagion of his courage. Grief is not the end of all. Our dead brothers still live for us and bid us think of life, not death. As I listen, the great chorus of life and joy begins again. Our trumpets sound once more a note of daring, hope, and will.
The exhibit you see here is a powerful reminder of the losses of war from the American Revolution through today. This display of fallen soldier battle crosses is intended to pay homage to America's fallen in current and past conflicts, some distant and almost forgotten, others closer in our hearts and memories. We honor the courage and tenacity of our nation's 18th, 19th, and 20th century soldiers and salute the volunteers of today. It is to all of them we owe our liberty and our gratitude. The helmet-on rifle with bayonet thrust in the ground was used during battle to mark the spot of a fallen soldier or Marine for later retrieval. It is a powerful symbol of respect and also of courage, sacrifice, and loss. Our current-day military rarely has the need to mark the fallen in this fashion. Instead, memorial services are often held after the battle that combine the helmet, rifle, and boots of each fallen soldier as part of a visual tribute. This combination has come to be known as the Fallen Soldier Battle Cross.
There are so many stories of service and sacrifice, and in tribute to those brave men and women who have served this country and to the many who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom, we wish to bring you a few of those stories today. They are stories of inspiration and courage, and we can learn from each of them.
Jack Edward Rowe was a Rhode Island native who enlisted in the United States Coast Guard to do his part in World War II. He found himself a seaman second class on the USS Dickman in the European theater. Throughout his tour, Jack had the habit of keeping a typewritten diary to record his thoughts and experiences, leaving behind a fascinating record of life on a ship and shore. His final entry on the morning of D-Day remains one of the most vivid and touching accounts of the Coast Guard on D-Day. June 6, 1944, 30 minutes past midnight. The entire 8th Division has just been called to chow down in 15 minutes. I have been up since 11:30, put on some heavy underwear because it is cold out. It was rough and windy. Minesweepers are sweeping the way and dropping buoys as they go. The sky is being lighted up by constant flashes about 2 points off the starboard bell. My shipmates are climbing out of the pits, some noisy as usual. Some of the noisier ones are very quiet, others talking, making speeches in a kidding way. Most were glad the time is here at last. It has been tiresome waiting month after month for something you know it was bound to happen. Well, I have a few little odds and ends to do before I go over the side. So I guess I will be off now to see history made and the biggest show of any war yet of its type. When I come back, I will have a lot to write about. As to coming back, there was no doubt in my mind but that I will. Sadly, Jack's final prediction did not prove to be true. Jack Edward Rowe was killed early in the morning on D-Day when his vessel was hit by an enemy shell. He was one of 13 Coast Guardsmen to die in the line of duty on June 6, 1944. God bless their memory.
Frank Price Draper, like so many other boys from Bedford County, grew up in a large family with little money. So poor were the Drapers that young Frank would stand by the railroad tracks that ran behind his home and taunt the conductors, hoping they'd throw coal at him, which would help heat the family's small home. Perhaps it was for relief from poverty that Frank joined Company A of the 116th Regiment, Virginia National Guard, when he was old enough. He proved to be an excellent soldier, but little could he know that his unit would be chosen to be one of the first to land on D-Day. Good-looking and athletic, Frank excelled at several sports, but especially loved baseball. While stationed in England, he helped his regiment win the European Theater World Series, hitting 2 triples in the title game. On D-Day, Tech Sergeant Draper was aboard LCA 910, approaching a stretch of sand codenamed Omaha Beach. The men had been told that aerial and naval bombardment would eliminate any German opposition, and they'd be able to stroll leisurely across the beach. As they approached the coast of France, however, it became clear that the enemy was alive and well and was determined to stop the invasion. Suddenly, Frank's landing craft was hit by artillery fire. A shell tore through the hull and struck Frank in the shoulder, nearly severing his arm. In shock, he struggled to stand, but it was clear he could not. Frank Draper never set foot in France. Most of his buddies that did fell on the beach. The wounded soldier was taken back to a British troop transport where he was laid on the deck to receive medical treatment, but his blood loss was too severe. There was nothing to be done. A sympathetic British sailor named Bert Fuller sat with Frank as he died, trying to bring some comfort to the young Virginian. Fuller removed a pair of binoculars from around Frank's neck and set them aside. Many years later, Fuller made sure those binoculars returned to the Draper family. Today, they are in the collection of the National D-Day Memorial. Frank's family, like dozens of others from Bedford County, was devastated by the news. In September 1944, on the day Frank would have turned 26, his mother wrote a letter to the local paper as a memorial. "I can't even see your grave, except in a dream," she grieved. My mind wanders thousands of miles across the mighty deep to a lonely little mound in a foreign land where the body of my dear soldier might be. This tired, homesick soldier boy who attended church in Bedford all his life was not buried in a nice casket with flowers and funeral procession. His dear body was laid to rest in a blood-soaked uniform, maybe draped in an American flag. There will not be any more cruel wars. Where have you gone, dear Frank? In 1948, the remains of Frank Draper were brought back to Bedford, and his family was finally able to honor him with proper, dignified funeral services. Today, he lies in Bedford's Greenwood Cemetery, not far from where he grew up. Historian Stephen Ambrose could have had Frank Draper in mind when he wrote of the U.S. servicemen. They wanted to be throwing baseballs, not hand grenades. But when the test came, when freedom had to be fought for or abandoned, they fought. They were soldiers of democracy, and to them, we owe our freedom.
Another vivid reminder of sacrifice is exemplified in a story shortly after D-Day involving Major Thomas D. Howie. Howie was battalion commander in the 116th Infantry Regiment of the 29th Division. He coached football and taught English at Stanton Military Academy in Virginia before the war. Howie landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day. A little more than a month later, on July 13, 1944, Major Howie was assigned to command the 3rd Battalion. On July 16th, the 3rd Battalion used hand grenades and bayonets to break through the German lines and joined the 2nd Battalion, which was isolated and nearly out of food and ammunition. Howie left the 2nd Battalion to defend the position, reporting that they were too cut up and planned to use the 3rd Battalion alone to capture St. Lo. On the morning of July 17th, Howie phoned Major General Charles Gerhardt, said, "See you in St. Lo," and issued orders for the attack. No doubt, in an effort to inspire his men, he was quoted as saying he wanted to be the first man entering the German stronghold of St. Lo. Shortly afterward, he was killed by shrapnel during a mortar attack. His last words were, "To St. Lo." The next day, the 3rd Battalion entered St. Lo with Howie's body on the hood of the lead jeep at Gerhardt's request, so that Howie would be the first American to enter the town. As a gesture of respect, his flag-draped body was carried into the city and placed on the rubble in front of the cathedral. A photograph of this scene was published in Life magazine. His name was withheld for censorship reasons, so the caption read, "The Major of St. Lo." Howie is buried at the Normandy American Cemetery along with the other 9,387 graves that overlook Omaha Beach.
At the National D-Day Memorial Foundation, we are very much aware that for every service member who has died for our nation on the battlefield, there are others on the home front who also endured an agonizing sacrifice. Starting in World War I and continuing in World War II and beyond, the families who lost loved ones in military service were recognized with an iconic banner that was to be hung in the family's window. The banner featured a vivid gold star, to signify that someone from that household had paid the ultimate price for freedom. These brave Americans became known as Gold Star families. Like their sons and daughters who died in uniform, they are also heroes. Herschel Woody Williams knows all too well the cost of serving on the front lines. The last living recipient of the Medal of Honor from the fierce Battle of Iwo Jima, Williams courageously stormed multiple enemy gun emplacements to silence the guns that had pinned down his comrades. His example of valor has inspired many since 1945, but Williams has always been quick to speak of the bravery of others ahead of his own. Beginning in 2013, the Herschel Woody Williams Medal of Honor Foundation has taken on the project of paying tribute to these brave Americans through the promotion, creation, and implementation of Gold Star Families Memorial Monuments throughout the nation. Woody personally chose the National D-Day Memorial as the site for the first one in Virginia and dedicated it here in 2017. Bedford, after all, is a town that understands what the defense of freedom can cost a community and its families. On D-Day, Bedford suffered the highest per capita loss of its sons than any other community in the nation. The community therefore had the highest percentage of Gold Star families for D-Day as well. The enduring pain of that sacrifice has indelibly shaped this community for more than 75 years now. Like so much of our memorial, our Gold Star Families Monument is a cathartic place for those who grieve. Though etched with World War II imagery, this monument is for all families at any point in our history who have lost loved ones, who have served and sacrificed so much for their country. To the rest, it is another reminder that freedom is not free. The price of liberty is borne by our sons and daughters in uniform and by the families they leave behind. We can never forget the sacrifices of either. Here, we remember them.
Here at the Annie J. Bronson Veterans Memorial Walk, the inscribed bricks are a permanent tribute to men and women who have served in the armed forces of the United States. These lasting tributes are not limited to service in World War II and can encompass any service period. Placed prominently on the memorial grounds, they will be viewed by thousands of visitors each year. The placement of each brick is not only an investment in the legacy of a loved one, but also an investment in the future of the memorial.
He stood beside his daddy, watched the soldiers passing by. It was Veterans Day, and he wondered why there were tears in Daddy's eyes. Later they laid flowers beside a monument of stone. He said, "Son, my daddy went to fight and never made it home. Fallen, not forgotten, they were the heroes, they stood so tall, and forever we will remember with honor and glory they gave their all." They left behind their cities and the towns where they were born for the rice paddies of Vietnam and the sands of Desert Storm. They were the soldiers in Korea and World War I and II. They paid the price, some gave their lives. They died for me and you. Fallen, not forgotten, they were the heroes, they stood so tall, and forever we will remember they gave their all. Honor and glory, honor and glory. Freedom is a blessing, but freedom has a price. We must remember those who paid it with their lives. Remember the fallen, they're not forgotten. They were the heroes, they stood so tall. And forever we will remember with honor and glory. They gave their all. Remember the fallen, they're not forgotten. They were the heroes, they stood so tall.